may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the king, the public weal, peace and tranquility of the island, the uniting and knitting together of the hearts of all persons and estates within the same, in true Christian love and charity, one towards another, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
You may be seated. Call of the roll. This honorable House now resume its sitting. Call of the roll.
Mr. Bartlett, Mr. Holness, Dr. Clark, Dr. Chang, Ms. Grange, Mrs. Williams, Mrs. Malahoo-Fort, Dr. Clark, Dr. Tufton, Mr. Mackenzie, Mr. Chuck, Mr. Vaz, Mr. Charles Jr., Mr. Green, Mr. Warmington, Mr. Morgan, Mr. Hutchinson, Mr. Terrelong, Ms. Smith, Dr. Dunn, Mrs. Cuthbert Flynn, Mr. Main, Mr. Davis, Mr. Whittor, Mr. Brown, Dr. Brown-Burke, Dr. Charles, Mr. Chin, Mr. Cousins, Ms. Crawford, Ms. Daly, Ms. Davis, Mr. Golding, Mr. Graham, Dr. Guy, Ms. Hamilton, Ms. Hannah, Mr. Enriquez, Mr. Henry, Mr. Hilton, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Lawrence, Ms. Lee, Mr. Miller, Mr. Montague, Ms. Morrison, Mrs. Nita Garvey, Mr. Paulwell, Mr. Phillips, Dr. Phillips, Mr. Robertson, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Samuda, Mr. Shaw, Mr. Siblis, Mr. Slowly, Mrs. Vaz, Dr. Wheatley, Mr. Williams, Mr. Wilson, and Mr. Wright, or Mr. Hilton, and Mr. Charles Jr. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. It is indeed a great pleasure to welcome all of you to the sitting of the Honorable House of Representatives on Tuesday, January 30th, 2024. I would like to extend a special welcome to those who are joining us online via the various social media platforms, the PBCJ live stream, as well as the students and teachers from the Olympus Academy in the Unity Hall section of St. James and the St. Jago High School in Spanish Town, St. Catherine. Let them feel welcome. Statement by ministers.
Mr. Speaker, we would like to join you in welcoming the students and a full house today. Mr. Speaker, it's very rare that we see this kind of attendance in the gallery, other than when we have the opening of the house. And it is good that the students, and I want to commend the Minister of Education because I saw her earlier up there with them. And particularly I want to welcome the students from Unity Hall in the great parish of St. James. I think, Mr. Speaker, you're familiar with that parish, yes. And of course, the Deputy Leader of the House reminds me that St. Catherine is also a good parish. And the students from St. Jago are here. Welcome to you all, and thank you very much. And I hope that you will enjoy the deliberations here today in this honorable house. Madam Speaker, it really is a good thing that we continue to do this to expose our students to our democracy, and particularly the institution that is at the heart and the center of governance in our country, where our lawmakers are and who have to do with the execution of the will of the people in this chamber. Madam Speaker, it is intended today to have Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you must forgive me because, you know, it's interesting that this honorable house in the last 8 years have had female speakers, and that's a good thing. So you forgive me. No, remember we had. So, Mr. Speaker, the member from Portland Western and the Minister of Science, Energy, Telecommunications, and Transport is slated to make a statement today. I now invite you to ask the member to so make his statement. May it please you, Mr. Speaker.
Before the minister rise, may I dare say also to the parents and teachers who have accompanied the children to this House of Parliament today, you are welcome just the same. You may rise.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise to give a brief statement as it relates to the Jamaica Urban Transit Company Limited, the JUTC. Mr. Speaker, last time I spoke, I tried to capture several different aspects of my portfolio, and I got through about 20% before I was told that my time was up. So in choosing to deal with JUTC today does not mean by any means that the other aspects of the transport portfolio are not as important. But I believe that with what has been transpiring in relation to the JUTC and the public users, commuters, calls for immediate action. And Mr. Speaker, I would further say that I wanted to make this statement before the silly season starts, because I would hate for this to be politicized based on the fact that this affects so many persons, almost 100,000 commuters on a daily basis. And they come from all constituencies in Spanish Town, Portmore, and Kingston, which are represented across the aisle. So, Madam Speaker, I rise today to update this honorable House on the efforts of the Ministry of Science, Energy, Telecommunications, and Transport to address some of the troubling problems facing the Jamaica Urban Transit Company Limited. I do so, Mr. Speaker, recognizing the importance of public transportation to the welfare of families, the productivity of the nation, and any effort to move Jamaica forward. For the past few months, the teams in the Transport Division of the Ministry and the JUTC have zeroed in on the many challenges facing our bus system. It has been an eye-opener for me as minister to get a first-hand view of some of the problems facing the public when trying to navigate a transportation system that frankly needs far more resources and overall. Madam Speaker, I've been known to say it, and I will repeat it in this honorable House. What exists today is unacceptable. It is unacceptable that in 2024, that commuters have to face the challenges that they are facing. Mr. Speaker, with an average bus runout of between 175 and 200 units a day, over the years, the JUTC has been severely impacted by an older fleet of buses and a depleting fleet. The average age, Mr. Speaker, is between 14 and 15 years old, and currently there's 194 buses that have been passed by the Ministry of Finance. What is it? Board of Survey? Basically to dispose of them. The government remains committed to its promise to upgrade the fleet and modernize the operations of the JUTC by a combination of acquiring more units for the fleet and increasing efficiency using a combination of energy sources such as electric and natural gas units. As a result, in 2023, 70 buses, including new buses, including 45 diesel, 20 CNG, and 5 electric buses, were purchased. Of the 70 buses, 56 of them have arrived and are currently being used in the service. And by the end of this fiscal year, the remaining 14 units are expected to arrive. Of the 14 units, 12 units are expected to arrive in April, and the other 2 will arrive in May 2024, equipped for the disabled community. In the meantime, the ministry has redoubled its effort to increase the overall fleet with an addition of 300 mixed energy buses. These will be added to the system over a 3-year period, beginning 24-25 financial year, with the first set of 100 CNG fuel buses set to arrive on the island between June and July of this year in time for back to school in September. 10 of the buses of the 100 will be equipped for the disabled community. And Mr. Speaker, that is a policy that I have implemented, that in the purchase of any set of buses, 10% must be for the disabled community. Currently, the JUTC has 12 buses that are in service for this disabled community. And in addition to the 2 expected in May 24, a total of 24 buses will be accessible by members of the disabled community, and those will be on the road by August 2024. Which means, Madam Speaker, that out of the 100 that is due to arrive mid-year, 10 of those 100, 10%, will be for the disabled. And as I said before, Mr. Speaker, any purchase of buses going forward will have a ratio of 10% of the purchase for the disabled community. Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker, you would have heard me state on a tour recently that I was pleading with the commuting public to give me 6 months. 6 months to better the system. And I am still holding to that. There's still be work to do, Mr. Speaker, but the bottom line is that you will see a great improvement in the efficiency of the JUTC by virtue of the addition of buses. Mr. Speaker, the battery electric bus project, which allowed for testing of 6 buses, commenced in 2023 and is ongoing. The purpose of the project is to evaluate the performance of these electric buses and to form the basis for comparison to the diesel and compressed natural gas. In essence, Mr. Speaker, the move to electric buses is definitively on the cards, but we feel that the technology needs more testing and improvement. So it will come in due course. Madam Speaker, given the lack of adequate resources and the urgent need to increase the productivity of the nation, the JUTC has embarked on a pilot for the testing of a fleet management system that involves robust fleet management models that allow for real-time monitoring and management of the bus fleet. It will provide essential data regarding vehicle location, route adherence, maintenance, schedules, fuel consumption, and driver performance. The objective is to improve the operational efficiency of the system by optimizing resource allocation, thereby enhancing the quality of the service provided, even as we seek to increase the number of units available to move the traveling public. Mr. Speaker, with that coming on stream, it will be the use of technology that you can use on your phone through an app to know exactly where the bus is and what time the bus is expected to be at your location, rather than having to stand up for 2.5 hours, waiting and praying that a bus will appear. Mr. Speaker, the worrying problem of violence in the society and on our roads continue to raise concerns about the safety in general. Regarding the public transportation system, we're taking steps to ensure that enhancement of the service includes tangible efforts to ensure passenger safety. Accordingly, we are seeking to have internal and external surveillance cameras installed in each bus. This addition will facilitate close monitoring and recording of activities. This will not only serve to deter potential criminal activity, but also assist in incident investigation and resolution. Special analytics cameras with facial recognition will also be installed at security posts to record any unauthorized dispatching of buses. Furthermore, the JUTC has partnered with Crime Stop to apprehend perpetrators who deliberately vandalize government's property. This is in conjunction with the JUTC's Franchise Protection Department and the Jamaica Constabulary Force. As I said earlier, another feature now being pursued is the development of a user-friendly mobile application to allow commuters to access real-time information about bus routes, estimated arrival times, and any service disruptions. The mobile app will enable passengers to track their bus live, plan their journeys, and receive notification and alerts regarding any changes or delay in service. Again, Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker, sorry, this will be a huge, huge help to the commuting public who already have the phones, and all they really need is the app to be able to do. Mr. Speaker, let me just say clearly that it pains my heart and my soul when I go to these transport centers and see what the commuting public has to go through. I see persons and I interact with persons who are of age, who have health conditions, and there is no seating and there is no covering from the elements. I went to North Parade and South Parade, both, and when I saw the bays, and there is no, absolutely no covering from the elements, and nowhere, remember that the students are here, please. I'm on best behavior today, please. Okay. I'm on best behavior. But on a serious note, Mr. Speaker, on a serious note, it is unacceptable. Whether it is for the mother with the baby in her arms, or the sick, or the aged, or somebody that is just not feeling well, to have to suffer without being able to have either shelter from the heat, or the sun, or the rain, and not a little seat to sit down on. These are not things that cost millions of dollars, Mr. Speaker. We can do better, and we must do better. Yeah. Mr. Speaker, while the company and the government are actively working on advancing the acquisition of the 300 buses over the next 3 years, we will still need to address a system which needs more safe and dependable units to fully address the need for more units. It has therefore been decided that the JUTC will embark on a bus refurbishing program, which will see 105 buses refurbished on a phased basis by the local dealers. The breakdown would be 25 Golden Dragon, 30 articulated, and 50 Volvo buses. Mr. Speaker, the cost to refurbish these buses, which are as old as 14 and 15 years, will be about 30 to 40% of the cost of a new bus. The highest bus being the Volvo bus at a cost of $300,000 US. The other two buses, the bus types, are $200,000. So if you can get 105 refurbished buses, and by refurbished, I'm talking about refurbished from the factory, from the manufacturer, persons from the factory coming here and redoing both the interior and the exterior and the engine. That, Mr. Speaker, will go a far way in allowing us. Is that me?
Member, your time is up.
Speaker, I beg to move that the member's time be extended in order for him to complete. Mr. Speaker, as you know, it's customary that it is 12 minutes, and we offer an additional 5 to enable the member to complete his presentation. May it please you, Mr. Speaker.
Those in favor? Those against? Ayes have it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am happy that the members are allowing me, especially based on the fact that none of us in here take the bus. We all have our cars and in some cases our drivers and our bodyguards. So it is important that we speak to this for the thousands of persons who have to use the public transportation system on a daily basis. I will try and wrap up as quickly as possible. Mr. Speaker, the 105 buses that we are going to refurbish are carefully selected to deal with some of the hill routes. $300,000 is the cost of the most expensive bus of these three. To buy a new one, 30 to 40% of that cost is what will be the refurbishing cost. So there is a significant savings, but obviously it's not a new bus. So, Mr. Speaker, these 105 buses are going to deal with the hill routes, and that would be the downtown to Stony Hill, the above rocks to Halfway Tree, border to Halfway Tree, and of course, the other buses will take, those will be the 9mm Golden Dragon. The other ones would be for the other routes that are underserved now. Mr. Speaker, the good thing is that these buses will start to be delivered in April of 24, going to May 2025. So once again, these are short-term solutions to ease the pressures of the demand and the waiting time. So through the execution of this initiative, we'll be able to rehabilitate buses at a significantly lower cost, and of course, most importantly, it will be to the benefit of the commuting public. Mr. Speaker, MSET is now preparing a cabinet note for the use of a completely cashless system for the proposed reduction in bus fares effective April 1st, 2024. In essence, commuters who pay their fares using a smart card come April 1st will benefit from the 50% fare reduction. In addition, and I wanted to listen to this, Minister Clark, in addition, they will receive an added benefit of 3 free rides, which will apply to both current and new card holders. So we are trying to incentivize them to utilize a cashless system, which is better for everybody because obviously it means that the flow of the loading of the buses can move much quicker. Again, the current fare collection system uses a limited cashless component. However, this system is to be replaced by a comprehensive cashless system which will provide the requisite efficiency and revenue protection to cover the entire service and guard against difficulties posed by cash transactions and delays and pilferage. Mr. Speaker, there are other things in relation to low-hanging fruits. We are going to be putting in guardrails at the Halfway Tree Transport Center and the other centers downtown, because what I see is a very dangerous situation where the interaction between the users and the buses are way too close, and how we have not had a tragedy already is by the grace of God. Other than that, Mr. Speaker, simple things, street lights, to make sure that persons that are using the bus at night are safer, and the community in and around Parade is safer. Easy, low-hanging fruit. Vendors, designated vendors areas for the vendors, rather than them interacting with the commuters in the loading bay, in the loading lane. It's just ridiculous. Mr. Speaker, we're going to be using energy efficiency of fuel to reduce emissions as well as maintenance cost. We did a pilot which was conducted and now underway for implementation. The long-awaited implementation of the biodiesel pilot, which will reduce fuel costs and emissions, is now underway. Again, JUTC and Petrojam are finalizing storage facilities. Again, Mr. Speaker, these are things that will assist greatly. Mr. Speaker, the JUTC received an unsolicited proposal for a fire suppression system, which the demonstration was conducted during Minister Audley Shaw at the time, and given an endorsement, and basically discussions are underway for implementation of that. Mr. Speaker, the bottom line as I wrap up, it is time for everyone to recognize that JUTC and its fleet of buses belong to the people of Jamaica. It is a critical investment that needs national support. And after my recent fact-finding mission, I appeal to the public to give me 6 months to put in place measures to improve the service of the JUTC and get additional buses in place to enhance the conditions of their travel. I must emphasize, however, that we need the nation's support as we seek to find ways of solving the challenges facing the JUTC and other areas of transportation, such as the Montego Bay Metro and the provisions of rural transportation service, especially for the school children. I will be saying a lot more in the weeks to come in relation to the rural school bus transportation system, which I have discussed with my colleague minister, and now to go to Minister Clark. But in closing, and I want you to believe me, Mr. Speaker and colleagues, we are going to see a significant change in the next 6 months. We are going to see a benefit to the commuters who will be able to have more buses, more reliable buses that will cut down the wait time. Mr. Speaker, as I close, there is enough blame to go around this parliament 5 times. I'm not into that. The ball is with me in my court, and I take full responsibility. But I don't want to be taken out of context in the silly season when I saw a headline that says, blame me. I don't mean blame me for what happened in the past. I said, give me 6 months and then blame me. So I want to make that clear so that when we leave this and go out on the field, that I don't hear any of my colleagues on that side blaming me for the current state of the transportation system. Mr. Speaker, with that I say, in all genuineness, the situation is unacceptable. And I honestly believe that we collectively we can do better, and we will do better. And I want to say a special thank you to the Ministry of Finance and Minister Clark, who have worked closely with over the last 3 months to make this a reality, including, Mr. Speaker, including getting the deposit for these buses paid now so that we can save 3 to 4 months, which is what is going to allow for the buses to arrive here in June to July. Mr. Speaker, to the people of this country, give me 6 months and blame me after. Thank you very much.
Member from Northwestern Manchester.
Mr. Speaker, you know, listening to the minister reminds me of the member from Eastern Portland. You know, when she says not beautiful speaking, but action, which is what is needed. Eh? So, Speaker, you know, I appreciate the Minister coming to update the House on what he intends to do at the ministry. But this has been a recurring decimal that we have been hearing over the last 8 years. And you have to take some responsibility because you are the 4th Minister of Transport in that period. And every single minister has come to promise what you have presented here. Talking about the fare collection, the cashless system, talking about the fleet management, everything that we have heard. What you need to accept is that the policies of your administration has really allowed the JUTC to regress. Yeah? And I agree with you. It's not a blame game. But the fact is the fact. Because the truth is that the last time that any buses were imported, prior to the 100 that you got, the 50, was in 2016. There was a program that was set in place to bring in some buses on an annual basis, because without buses, the JUTC will become ineffective despite whatever plans you have. That's the fact. So you're seeing the fare boxes reducing from a $4 billion annually to, just today they were at the PAAC to about $1.2 billion estimated for this year. You needed a rollout of buses of about 450 to 500. You had 175. So without the buses, I am supporting you. And I hope that the Minister of Finance hold to, or your administration, hold your word in importing those 300 buses over the 3-year period, as you have stated. Because actually, that 100 buses that you have ordered now, before the end of the next financial year, you should have another 100 being delivered. If you are to at least deliver at least some of the seats that the license that the JUTC has are able to deliver to the people. The refurbishing of the buses, and you are correct. It shows that the older the bus is, the more expensive it is to repair. Because one of those articulated buses, to what we were told today at the PAC, it's about 600,000 US. You are spending about 400,000 to fix up one of these old articulated buses. While we are subsidizing the JUTC at $7 to $8 billion annually, we have subsidized it about $50 billion over the last 5 to 6 years. We have to look at the JUTC as a growing concern, Minister. I mean, your administration, you're in power. But it can't continue the way that it is and expect that taxpayers will continue to subsidize it, while children and elderly in my constituency, your side of the country, and other rural parishes don't have the same subsidy, have to pay full fare. And only those traversing from Spanish Town, Portmore, and in the KMR here, that get a subsidy at $8 billion. And you're expecting a $10 billion loss this year at the JUTC, which is even going to be worse with the reduction in fares that the Minister of Finance has proposed, or which is now in effect. Because coming out of the PAAC today, I mean, they said they requested $475 million, which is the reduction in receipt that they would get, and you're getting 315. Wow. It has to come from somewhere. So is it that we're going to look at it, the JUTC, as it is now until you build it out, or are we going to continue to subsidize it with the rate that we are subsidizing and still not giving the service that it needs. It is something that I'm tired of standing in the House and asking the same question after 4 ministers getting a similar presentation, and I hope to God, just for the people of Jamaica, that you deliver on these that you're saying. But it can't be delivered if you don't get the resources to do it. It may not be a failure of the ability of the previous ministers, but if your policy is not to ensure that the JUTC can improve, then we'll continue subsidizing it and still giving a bad service to the public of Jamaica. So there's not much to say on what it is that you have promised. You have my support on the improvement, meaning the opposition support on the improvement of the service of the JUTC, but it cannot be business as usual, as we have seen in the past. It is too much of taxpayers' money really going down the drain. You need 150 buses for Portmore and you only have 75. You're going to. So even when you put in this fleet management and the app.
Time.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the member's time be extended by 3 minutes to allow him to complete his presentation. May it please you, Mr. Speaker.
Those in favor? Those against? Ayes have it. Members, stick to your time, please.
Yes, Minister. So even with the app, which is good, you still don't have the buses to service your customers. You have 1 million Jamaicans that are dependent on public transport. Kingston and St. Andrew and Portmore and Spanish Town has a large percentage of that. That national transport plan that we keep speaking of is something that is needed urgently if we are to deal with transport, not only the JUTC, but transport overall, island-wide, dealing with rural communities, dealing with the parking situation. You went downtown. As you said, it has been a long time that you haven't been down to Parade. But that in itself, from JOS time, so it shows you how long. But that's what many Jamaicans have to endure, Minister, on a daily basis, not only in downtown, but in rural Jamaica too. So while you're dealing with the parking situation and the comfort, because public transport should not only be on the revenue side, but it also should be about the safety and comfort of the traveling public. That is critical if we're going to have a successful public transport. So, Mr. Speaker, a recurring decimal. Let's just hope that there's action this time and not just sweet talk. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Just to answer one of his questions out of 15 minutes. Firstly is that we will have, in the next 12 months, 114 new buses and 105 reconditioned buses. That's right. So that's 219 buses that will be in the system, and I can assure you that that will go a far way in improving the efficiency. The second point is, I agree with you 100%. You have to have a short term and a medium term. This is a short. But the savings from the losses from the pay box, as you call it, and from the pilferage of diesel is going to be significant in relation, tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions. That is going to be reinvested in the JUTC. But I will close by saying to you that I agree that while we are doing this, we have to do an audit on JUTC administratively to see how and what is required to beef it up so that it can be that more efficient. So I am very clear on that. And in the meantime, while we are waiting on these buses, the management of JUTC has to take a more hands-on approach during the peak hours. Persons that have the power and the authority to redirect buses when there is a line of people waiting on a particular route and a bus sitting down, waiting, doing nothing. So there are plans in place. And as I said before, and I will close by saying again, just give me the little 6 months me ask for. All right? And when you come back on the Transport Council, next week to the next meeting, now that me and Mr. Mark talk, you understand? We will work together. And we will visit and travel on the buses together and the transport centers. And in closing, I have been to Otres, I've been to Falmouth, and I've been to Portland. And I've looked at the transport centers, which are not under my remit. But I have a plan, because I am going to put together with the Minister of Local Government to do some public-private partnerships to allow persons who can benefit from the 20,000 people going through Falmouth on a daily basis to use their branding through advertising to be able to put up the shelters, put up the seating, put up the lights, and put up the facilities in and around the transport center so that people can do other business there while they are waiting on the buses. So again, I'm from a rural constituency, so you don't need to tell me. Some of them are absolutely, totally not workable. Some of them are very workable, but the government does not have the resources to do what is needed, and therefore we must partner. And I'm sure that my good friend, the opposition leader, will agree. This is what public-private partnership is the only way in times like this. And it can work seamlessly, transparent, and everybody has an opportunity. So, as I say, let me close again. May I beg you the 6 months? Give me the 6 months. Thank you very much.
Member from St. Mary Central, I hope by the standing order, it's a question that you're going to ask.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Minister, you indicated in, well, the pages are unnumbered, but in bus refurbishing that the program will see 105 buses refurbished on a phased basis by local dealers. Years ago, the JUTC had embarked on a program where they were retrofitting their repair facilities, as well as using the expertise of the German automotive school in doing some of the repairs for the buses. Have you abandoned that particular program? Because this here indicates that you are only relying on the local dealers. What is the position right now?
In the final composition of it, there will have to be a component because there has to be knowledge transfer. So it's not that we're going to bring Chinese and Germans here to come and refurbish and retrofit a bus and then leave and go back. There has to be some integration. And the school would be the perfect opportunity. So I take that on, and I will make sure, I didn't ask specifically, but now that you have raised it, I will make sure that there is a component in there for the knowledge transfer.
Announcement.
Laid on the table of the House are the following. Minister Paper number 07 of 2024 entitled National Correctional Services Policy for Jamaica, dated January 16, 2024. Annual reports of the Jamaica Racing Commission for the financial years 2015, 2016, and 2016-27, along with their related minister paper numbered 08 of 2024 under the said title. Annual reports of the Jamaica Racing Commission for the financial years 2017-2018 and 2018-2019, along with their related minister paper numbered 09 of 2024 under the said title. Annual report of the Tourism Enhancement Fund for the financial year 2022-2023. Annual report of the Tourism Product Development Company for the financial year 2020-2021. Annual report of the audited financial statements of the National Housing Trust for the financial year 2022-2023. Green paper numbered 01 of 2024 entitled National Correctional Services Policy for Jamaica. And finally, head 15,000 from the for the Office of the Prime Minister for the year 2020-2021 from the Auditor General's Department. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, at the end of the last sitting, I asked the Speaker about a report from the Integrity Commission, which was sent to the Parliament a week ago on Monday, and the Speaker's curt response was it would be dealt with in accordance with her ruling. Her ruling, which I don't agree with, but nonetheless is her ruling, said that investigative reports would be tabled as soon as possible. That report was sent to the Houses of Parliament on January 22nd, which is last week, Monday. We are now at the 30th. I don't see it on the announcements, so I'd like to know what the status of that report is. And I would also like to know whether the Parliament is in receipt of any other report from either the Integrity Commission or the Auditor General's Department that has not been tabled as yet.
As to the question that you have raised as it relates to the IC, I am not in a position to give an answer to that. I will investigate as best as possible, and if be, I'll bring back information to the House of Parliament. I will give an answer as soon as it is with me. Bills brought from the Senate, petitions, papers, report from committees.
Mr. Speaker, at this time, the report of the PAAC, we are awaiting the completion of the report, and so we will be asking for a recommittal. Thank you.
Okay. Notice of motion given orally.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move to introduce and have read the first time a bill shortly entitled the Political Ombudsman Interim Amendment Act 2024.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next sitting of the House, I will move the motion. Whereas a large and growing number of account holders at banks and other financial institutions in Jamaica have been experiencing substantial losses of nearly $1 billion from their accounts. And whereas many account holders are experiencing difficulties in recovering their losses at banks and other financial institutions, and whereas in many instances where reported losses or portions thereof are returned to their accounts after many months, during such period of severe hardships are experienced by such persons. And whereas the Banking Services Act of 2014 under Section 36 states, quote, every director, officer, and key employee of a licensee shall, in discharge of his functions, A, act honestly and in good faith in the best interest of the licensee and for the protection of depositors' funds, and B, exercise the care, diligence, and skill that a reasonably prudent director, officer, or key employee would exercise in similar circumstances. And whereas all banks and other financial institutions in Jamaica have sought to discourage and reduce services inside the banking halls and have been encouraging the use of automated teller machines or their equivalent outside their facilities. And whereas many banks have elected to close many of their branches across the country, and whereas most government and private sector employees can only access their salaries from designated bank accounts to meet their day-to-day expenses and other financial obligations. And whereas many of the automated teller machines or their equivalent regularly malfunction, causing inconvenience, difficulties, and hardships to account holders. Be it resolved that the Economy and Production Committee of the House of Representatives convenes a meeting with the relevant representatives of the Bank of Jamaica to investigate the magnitude of the losses to account holders, banks, and other financial institutions, and with a view to determining what steps can be taken in an effort to mitigate the negative impact on account holders of licensees of the BOJ. And that the committee commence meeting on this motion within 45 days of the motion being referred to the committee. And be it resolved that the BOJ establishes minimum service standards for the operations of its licensees with accompanying sanctions where none currently exist. And be it further resolved that the resolution be referred to the Economy and Production Committee of the House of Representatives for consideration and report. Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice at a later stage today. I will move for the suspension of standing orders to enable me to take this motion.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move to introduce and have read a first time a bill shortly entitled the Road Traffic Reprieve and Nullification of Prescribed Notices Amendment Act 2024.
The question. The question and answers to questions. Motion that may be made at the commencement of public business required notice. Motion relating to sitting of the House. Motion for leave to introduce bills. Presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained.
Mr. Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to introduce and have read the first time a bill shortly entitled the Political Ombudsman Interim Amendment Act 2024.
The question is that the standing order be suspended to allow the minister to take the first reading of a bill shortly entitled the Political Ombudsman Interim Amendment Act 2024. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I now move that a bill shortly entitled the Political Ombudsman Interim Amendment Act 2024 be read the first time.
A bill shortly entitled the Political Ombudsman Interim Amendment Act 2024 read a first time.
Mr. Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take second reading of the bill and to take it through all its concluding stages.
The question is for the standing orders to be suspended to enable the minister to take the second reading of the bill.
Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I now move for the suspension of standing orders to enable me to introduce and have read a first time a bill shortly entitled the Road Traffic Reprieve and Nullification of Prescribed Notices Amendment Act 2024.
The question is that the standing order be suspended to allow the minister to take the first reading of the bill shortly entitled the Road Traffic Reprieve and Nullification of Prescribed Notices Amendment Act 2024. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I now move that a bill shortly entitled the Road Traffic Reprieve and Nullification of Prescribed Notices Amendment Act be read a first time.
A bill shortly entitled the Road Traffic Reprieve and Nullification of Prescribed Notices Amendment Act 2024 read a first time.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice of second reading of the bill.
Public business.
Mr. Speaker, I'm beginning to feel that that side of the House is getting a little agitated. And I don't know what is causing the agitation. I don't know what is causing the agitation, Mr. Speaker, but it's a kind of, almost like a nervousness that I'm detecting. Not sure what it is about, but no doubt we'll understand better by and by. Mr. Speaker, for public business, we will have, of course, the bill which the member from St. Andrew Northeast tabled in respect of the amendments to the Political Ombudsman Act 2024. And at a later point, Mr. Speaker, when the report from the PAAC is ready, we will have a referral back to notice of motion given orally, and then we will then revert to public business to enable the Minister of Finance to take the bill in his name. May it please you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take second reading of the bill, notice of which I gave earlier, and also for me to take it through all its concluding stages.
The question is for the standing order to be suspended to enable the minister to take the second reading of the bill, notice of which he gave earlier, and also for him to take it through all its concluding stages. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the bill before the House today is entitled An Act to Amend the Political Ombudsman Interim Act and to provide for connected matters. Mr. Speaker, the proposal to amend the Political Ombudsman Act 2002 in great part came about as a result of a motion that was originally moved in Parliament in November 2012 by the Member of Parliament from Southwest St. Catherine, The proposition was for the commissioners of the Electoral Commission of Jamaica, hereinafter referred to as the ECJ, to assume the responsibilities of the Office of the Political Ombudsman, and this was examined by a parliamentary committee and adopted unanimously. However, around that time, there had been an appointment to the Office of the Political Ombudsman. So as to avoid termination of this appointment, and for the purpose of further consultation, the government found it appropriate to delay the proposed amendment to the Political Ombudsman Interim Act until now. The Political Ombudsman in Jamaica, Mr. Speaker, has been vacant since November 15, 2022. Consequently, the functions of the Office of the Political Ombudsman, in particular, investigating complaints of misconduct or bias by political parties, its members or supporters, is not being carried out. The operation of the Office of the Political Ombudsman is intended to provide oversight of the conduct of political parties, its members and supporters, by promoting good governance and ensuring that political actors adhere to prescribed codes and ethical standards. Similarly, Mr. Speaker, the ECJ is expected to safeguard the democratic foundations of Jamaica by enabling eligible electors to elect through free and fair elections their representatives to govern Jamaica. On its face, Mr. Speaker, it is submitted that the work of the Office of the Political Ombudsman and the work of the ECJ could be appropriately described as synergistic. The proper execution of the functions of the former entity provides a more peaceful and civil landscape for the implementation of the duties of the latter. Mr. Speaker, it is also submitted that the Office of the Political Ombudsman and the ECJ are both established parliamentary commissions operating under the auspices of their respective legislation and reporting to Parliament in accordance with prescribed norms and functions. In light of the related functions, Mr. Speaker, of both entities, it is submitted that the ECJ is the entity that is most appropriately suited to undertake the responsibilities of the Office of the Political Ombudsman. But, Mr. Speaker, it is an opportune time now for the implementation of the proposed centralization of services provided by the Office of the Political Ombudsman under the auspices of the ECJ, as the independence of the Office of the Political Ombudsman would be strengthened as a result of the expansion of the Commission from one individual to the ECJ. This approach, Mr. Speaker, will allow for a more fulsome examination of the matters brought to the Office of the Political Ombudsman, as matters will be scrutinized through the individual and collective lenses of the members of the ECJ, who are required to exercise fairness and are bound by the Electoral Commission Interim Act to perform their functions within specified parameters. Mr. Speaker, it is also anticipated that this amalgamation of functions will result in institutional and financial gains to the Office of the Political Ombudsman. Mr. Speaker, the unanimous report of Parliament, this Parliament, detailing the assumption of the responsibilities of the Office of the Political Ombudsman by the ECJ was submitted to Cabinet by the Ministry of Justice, by me, Mr. Speaker, which was approved by Cabinet. Since then, the Ministry of Justice has been in contact with the commissioners and of the ECJ, who are in agreement with the assumption of these responsibilities as proposed. The Ministry of Justice has also seized the opportunity to consider how other jurisdictions manage their political processes, in particular, any complaints of misconduct or bias by government officials or political parties that may arise, as well as the penalties that are imposed in response to any breach committed. It should be noted, Mr. Speaker, that several alternative arrangements were considered and discussed with the ECJ, such as a single commissioner or the selected commissioners assuming the role of the political ombudsman. However, Mr. Speaker, the commissioners of the ECJ were firm, very firm, in their belief that the role and responsibilities of the political ombudsman is best assumed as an indivisible body, which is the full complement of the ECJ. In their letter to me, Mr. Speaker, me, the Minister of Justice, the chairman wrote, amongst other things, the commissioners continue to support the proposal that the functions of the Office of the Political Ombudsman by the ECJ. However, we are of the view that all commissioners should support the functions of the Political Ombudsman. The matters to be addressed by the Ombudsman are primarily related to conduct. We believe that the full Commission, including both selected and nominated commissioners, are best suited to address the nuances relating to conduct, and we strongly suggest that in this regard, the commissioners shall be indivisible, unquote. It is the government's considered view, Mr. Speaker, that more benefit will be derived by the country by having the ECJ with 9 individuals drawn from different segments of the society with varied skills that can be applied to the conduct of the work of the Office of the Political Ombudsman versus the retention of a single person in that office. This is especially true, Mr. Speaker, when looked at in the context of the impact of a recommendation issued by the ECJ to a political party or its representatives to correct breaches of the political code of conduct as against that issued by a single individual. Mr. Speaker, there's really no comparison to be made, as the ECJ wields significantly more influence than one individual. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, the strength of utilizing the 9-member Electoral Commission as a political ombudsman is buttressed by the simple fact that it has offices in all 63 constituencies and therefore has greater administrative support as well as resources to assist with the investigation of complaints. And not only that, Mr. Speaker, but to be able to get information, intelligence, and corroboration of allegations of breaches and misconduct. Also, Mr. Speaker, the enforcement of the recommendations of the political ombudsman becomes easier as there's greater persuasive power by having representatives from the 2 main political parties, which will in turn give the recommendation of the ECJ greater legitimacy and greater likelihood of compliance. Finally, Mr. Speaker, the work of the political ombudsman usually reaches its zenith in the lead-up to elections, whether local government or general elections. Mr. Speaker, it is therefore imperative that the political candidates sign the political code of conduct at the earliest opportunity after nomination day. So, Mr. Speaker, it is with all this in mind that I commit this bill, which seeks to amend the Political Ombudsman Interim Act and consequentially amend the Electoral Commission Interim Act to the House for approval. I will now, Mr. Speaker, take us through the clauses of the bill. Clause 1 of the bill makes it abundantly clear that the bill shall be read and construed as one with the Principal Act and all amendments thereto. Clause 2 of the bill proposes an amendment to Section 4 of the Principal Act by deleting reference to a single person being appointed to the Office of the Political Ombudsman and substituting this with the ECJ that is established under the Electoral Commission Interim Act. Clause 3 of the bill proposes to repeal Sections 5, 6, 7, 8 of the Principal Act, which treats with the human resource considerations of the Commission of the Political Ombudsman. Clause 4 of the bill proposes to repeal Section 9 and the first schedule of the Principal Act, which treats with the entitlement to pensions and other benefits by the Commission of the Political Ombudsman. However, notwithstanding the proposed repeal, these provisions will continue to apply in respect of the payments of benefits to any persons entitled to receive such payments as on the date immediately preceding the repeal. Clause 5 of the bill proposes to amend Section 12(2) of the Principal Act by replacing the reference to Section 25 of the Constitution with Section 19 in light of the 2011 amendment of the Constitution. Clause 6 of the bill proposes to repeal Section 19 of the Principal Act in light of the existence of a similar provision in the Electoral Commission Interim Act, which treats with accounts and audit. Clause 7 of the bill proposes to repeal Section 25 of the Principal Act in light of the process to appoint the members of the ECJ that is outlined in the Electoral Commission Interim Act. Clause 8 of the bill proposes to amend the second schedule of the Principal Act by inserting the word interim next to the word political ombudsman. Clause 9 of the bill consequentially amends Section 6(1) of the Electoral Commission Interim Act so as to recognize the operationalization of the ECJ under the Political Ombudsman Interim Act. Mr. Speaker, I look forward to the support of the members of this critical piece of legislation, which is even more important in light of certain pending events.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hear the words of the Minister of Justice seeking support for this bill. And the truth is that this idea of reposing the responsibilities that were vested in the office of the Political Ombudsman under the Principal Act, reposing them in the Electoral Commission in some way, has been promoted for some time. And indeed, I believe members on this side had at times indicated that that was a good idea. But with the passage of time, I must say that, speaking for myself, I have grave misgivings about it. First of all, I'm going to speak about the process by which this bill is coming here. We have not been sent a copy of this bill. We're seeing it for the first time when it's tabled this afternoon. I don't know whether there are errors in it. It's repealing and amending numerous provisions in the Principal Act. We have seen where bills that have been pushed through here before have errors in them and are going to have to be fixed by subsequent legislation. We're seeing it with the firearms legislation, and indeed we're seeing it with the other amending bill that was tabled by the Minister with responsibility for transport today, the Road Traffic Reprieve and Nullification of Prescribed Notices Amendment Act 2024, which is seeking to correct things in the Principal Act passed a year ago, the Road Traffic Reprieve and Nullification Prescribed Notices Act 2023. So something like this should not be tabled and passed on the same day, because we should need to have a chance to look at it more carefully. Secondly, this impacts the Electoral Commission of Jamaica, and matters to do with electoral law have been approached in a bipartisan way for the last 30 or so years in this country, 40 years. For good reason, because we come from a history of intense partisanship in our politics, which has at times spilled into the realm of violence. And we have tried our best as a nation to evolve away from that. And the Electoral Advisory Committee, which has, through various iterations, become the Electoral Commission of Jamaica, which subsumes the Electoral Office of Jamaica, has built an enviable reputation for its expertise and its independence. And The reason why that has happened is because of the approach, the convention, so to speak, by which both political parties have operated in relation to that institution to try and ensure that as much as possible things proceed in a bipartisan way. Therefore, if you are going to proceed with legislation to integrate the Political Ombudsman's office or functions through legislation into the ECJ, surely there ought to have been some bipartisan discussion on the specific provisions that you are bringing to Parliament. There has been none. The last thing I heard about this before a week or so ago, when our representatives on the ECJ told me what was being proposed. What I'd heard before was that what was being proposed was to save costs by establishing within the Electoral Office of Jamaica a position that would be supported administratively by the existing administrative arrangements of the Electoral Office, so there would not have to be a duplication of administrative staff, and that office would play the role of the Political Ombudsman. Apparently that idea lost favor and morphed into the commissioners themselves becoming the Political Ombudsman. And as I said before, I think the process that is being followed is wrong. I do not think we should be seeking to pass this bill today. I think we should have proper discussions about it and a period of time to reflect on whether or not it's going down the right path. From a substantive point of view, my misgivings are that the Electoral Commission has achieved a level of stature in the society, even internationally, because it is perceived as being independent and out of the fray. And it takes its decisions not by favoring any political party, but in the interest of fairness and efficiency of the electoral system. And that is a very valuable reputation to have developed. That stature should not be diluted, or we shouldn't play games with it. By investing these responsibilities in the ECJ, they are now going to have to adjudicate like a quasi-judicial body on matters that will be intensely in dispute between partisans in the political process. And that is now changing the character of the ECJ by giving them functions which are completely inconsistent with the detached, independent, and objective aura that they have enjoyed for so long, where they have the nominated representatives and the selected representatives. The two political parties have, I think, 2 representatives on the commission each, and then there are the independent persons or persons of repute, and indeed the way they are appointed by the Governor-General, there's a consultation process between the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition, so that we typically would enjoy, whoever's there as an independent body are those the nominated representatives. The nominated representatives typically enjoy the trust and confidence of both political parties because of the way in which that convention has worked. So I think this is going down a dangerous and wrong path. I do not think that the ECJ commissioners should take on this function of being an adjudicatory body on political disputes in the heat of election campaigns. That is completely inconsistent with the way in which they have operated in the past. And I don't think we should be going down this route. That's my own view. Secondly, what I've heard the minister say is that they are to function as a political ombudsman as an indivisible body. Now, I believe there are 9 ECJ commissioners. 9. This is like the US Supreme Court, which has 9 justices on it when it sits. Does that mean that when a dispute has to be adjudicated, all 9 have to be present? There are no regulations governing the procedure for the adjudication of these matters. This piece of legislation doesn't have anything in it about the adjudication procedure that they will be obliged to follow to comply with the rules of natural justice, but also to allow them to operate with some efficiency,
given that there are 9 of them. If one is absent, does that mean a hearing can't be held? Or 2? There are no procedures to govern how they operate, and it should not come here without those procedures being part of it, because those procedures will themselves be contentious, or could be, and ought to be something that there is bipartisan support for. This bill here says nothing about how this indivisible body of 9 commissioners will operate in practice and in law when a matter comes before them where 2 or more persons in the political fray have had a dispute of one sort or another in the heat of the electoral process. So I don't think this is ready. I don't think it's a good idea, and I cannot support it. The process is wrong. We were not involved in the development of this bill. We never had a chance to look at it. We do not know if it has errors or not. And in principle, I think it's going down a dangerous route. And I acknowledge, Minister, that in the past we may have supported this idea. But with the passage of time and the discussions that we've had, especially recently internally at our executive and so on, we have a grave concerns that this is not the right approach to be taking. And I don't like the idea of us having a difference of view in this forum on a matter like this, because that's not how we've operated in relation to the ECJ in the past. So it really pains me to having to be saying these things. But I have no alternative, because I hold these views strongly, and I think I'm right in principle, and I have to articulate my position on it. So, Mr. Speaker, I cannot support this legislation, either because from the point of view of the process by which it got here, which is deeply flawed, and because substantively, I think it's a wrong approach. It's a dangerous approach, and it will not inure to the benefit of Jamaica's electoral system. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member from St. Catherine Southern.
Mr. Speaker, at the outset, the observations and the comments from the leader of the opposition meets with my full endorsement. Mr. Speaker, as a country and as a parliament, we have come a far way. The Electoral Commission of Jamaica is perhaps one of the most successful institutions that we have created in this country. Its success was not just by the PNP or the GLP or the government or the opposition. It is both working together against the background of our sad experiences over 40 years ago. When I travel overseas and people talk about political violence in Jamaica, I can rebuke them with a lot of confidence because of our success in Jamaica in how we conduct elections, because of what we did together. And I want the point that the leader of opposition made that I want to highlight. Even talking about it here is a bit uncomfortable. We have done it otherwise and do it well. Why are we going to disturb that? Why? Mr. Speaker, we have kind of created a crisis. Because the office of the Political Ombudsman has been vacant for over a year. We never just arrive at this position. I think it's about October 2022, November 2022. Over a year, the office has been vacant. It's important to appreciate, Mr. Speaker, the distinct difference between the ECJ and the Political Ombudsman's office. On the one hand, the ECJ deals with the operations, technicalities regarding elections, boundaries, which has been a very contentious issue in many decades before. We never had any problem with those for over 40-odd years. And they were done in an unbiased way. And they have been resolved without no rancor on either side. Minister, that's an enormous achievement. Why are we risking it? On the other hand, the political ombudsman sought to deal with conduct of the political actors on both sides, and how we can restrain the conduct so that it preserves the political atmosphere in an amicable and healthy way. Very different. So the ECJ, all of us in here, well, we should know about the ECJ from being to get elected to come here. We know about the ECJ. What the political ombudsman office has been successful in doing is to keep those things out of the ECJ. So it keeps the ECJ sterile of the cascas and the comments that will injure the political environment. What the minister is seeking to do with this bill is to converge them with the risk of infecting the ECJ with the couscous that come through the office of the political ombudsman. That's the danger. That's the danger. A major risk that, minister, it don't worth taking that risk. It doesn't worth it. I know, I'm quite confident that you have great sincerity in what you want to achieve. But our experiences must teach us something, and we be guided by those experiences. We can't ignore them and just have wishful thinking that it will not occur, because the price is too significant. Yes, yes, we need to deal with a situation now. An election, as you intimated, is looming. Don't make fixed arrangement for an immediate situation. And we are proposing that together, both sides, the general secretaries of both parties sit on there, and you have the Vale Royal process that can be used to sit quietly outside of the light and arrive at an arrangement to take us through the next election in the immediate. Because apparently that's what you want to address while the bill is being rushed to be taken through all its stages today. All its stages today. So we are saying, the opposition is saying, Minister, pause. Pause on this one. Let us sit down as of tonight. We are ready. Sit and work out something to carry us through the election that is looming. Next point, Minister. I don't know what is the level of discussions that took place between your office and the independent members of the commission. I don't know. But a concern I have is that all the independent commissioners currently would have accepted the office against the background of what obtained. To do this is to foist a new arrangement on them. You know, we know, Minister, there are many persons who don't want to get into the political thing. They don't want to get into that. So to the extent that you have the independent commissioners currently in place at the ECJ, out of the blue, we are imposing this on them. They never took the office knowing very well that this would be part of their remit. That's not fair to them. So, yes, Mr. Minister, the question of cost, the seasonal activity of the Office of the Political Ombudsman, those are pertinent issues to be addressed. But the way we are going about it is too risky, too dangerous, and we have too much to lose. So in closing, Mr. Minister, I'm appealing to you. This matter ought not to be a contentious one. Ought not to be. And I ask for two things. Pause on it now. Let us begin a whole process of interaction, work out an interim arrangement to take us through the next election. And at the meantime, simultaneously, we can look at what permanent or long-term arrangement we could put in place to suffice what is presented here. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
Member from St. Andrew Western.
Speaker, I want firstly to associate myself with the remarks fully of the previous members of the opposition, both the leader of opposition and my colleague. My intervention is very short. To say this, Mr. Speaker, we really ought not to conflate the success in one area with the challenges posed in another area, however related they are. The fact is that they deal with different aspects of the political process, and to try to integrate them into one body runs the risk of pulling the members, particularly the independent members of the Commission, which is where a lot of the success lies, into the political thicket. And it has been an experience elsewhere that the political thicket is something to be avoided, particularly as it relates to adjudication. And it is that aspect of it that I find concerning, that if you impose the role of an adjudicator in what will be and has been a heated process, for the time the Ombudsman functioned, in fact, I think that's the reason why the Ombudsman, there were disagreements about different rulings, and every ruling that I can recall was met with disagreement by one side or another. Everyone. And that is the practice, is what has resulted. So we should learn from that. That is not a simple process, that it is likely to continue. And Minister, I suggest that with deeper reflection, we'll want to say that's not the position we want to put the members, particularly the independent members of the ECJ, into. I don't think we should, it's not a roll of the dice, is not what we want here. We want sober reflection and not a roll of the dice. But consider, Minister, very, very closely what we are doing today. It is a very risky proposition.
Member from St. Andrew Southeastern.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to associate with the remarks of my colleagues. I would have been in the Parliament when there was support for this proposal to move it to the ECJ. So let me acknowledge that. And it was primarily sold on the basis as a cost-saving measure. There was a view, yes, there was a view that the Office of the Ombudsman was not needed on a full-time basis, and that it primarily functioned around election time. And there was a strong view that resources that were being expended on that office would be better subsumed under the ECJ. That was, I would say, if my recollection is correct, the primary rationale for the proposal, which had the support of the opposition at the time. But given the passage of time and the reflection, and as a former ECJ member, there are contentious discussions at the ECJ, but they are held behind closed doors. And once you leave the ECJ, there is one position, regardless of what takes place behind closed doors. By putting the role of the Ombudsman, who has to adjudicate on the most contentious matters, it is going to be difficult to hold that consensus. Very difficult. The process the Ombudsman employs by its nature, involves an element of natural justice. The political parties, generally, the General Secretary is invited to a discussion, generally first by yourself, the other party by themselves, and then both parties together. It provides the opportunity for people to be heard and for the matters to be adjudicated in a fair and transparent manner. Subsuming it with the ECJ, which has been and continues to be a success story in terms of the management of our electoral affairs, risk damaging that independence and perception of impartiality that currently exists. And the ECJ has a very strong reputation, not just in Jamaica, but actually across the region and the world. And in fact, their members are sought after by other electoral commissions. So we accept the need to have an ombudsman. We are for an ombudsman. Where the disagreement is putting the ombudsman under the auspices of the ECJ. The other point I would like to mention, which is not contained in the bill, one of the criticisms of the ombudsman was that he or she had no power to enforce anything. It was just relying on moral suasion. And I think newspapers have called the person a paperless tiger. So as we contemplate the role of a new ombudsman, we should also define whether we put in particular sanctions, and I don't know what those are at this point, but they're not here. But we should consider that beyond moral suasion, because frankly, there have been rulings that we strongly disagree with, there have been rulings that you strongly disagree with, and they're never enforced. We're not supposed to have up billboards and posters. Well, 3 years later, they're still up there. We're not supposed to have up flags. They're still up there. So I think consideration must be given as to the appropriateness of sanctions as we put this bill together. But my final point is I know the imperative to implement something quickly because local government elections are due anytime now. But let's not rush and make a fatal mistake which damages the ECJ, which we'll never be able to recover from later on down the road. Thank you.
Member from Kingston Eastern and Port Royal.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The term hypocrite has been used in these places for some time, and to prevent any such description being ascribed to me, let me just say that I was very much involved in 2012 when the matter came here. And it was influenced by two things: the relative dormancy, but really lack of effectiveness of the role of the political ombudsman, largely because that person did not have the requisite authority and power to pursue sanctions after investigations. And then the other reason was because of the cost of maintaining an office that was dormant for the most part of the political term. And it was supported by our side at the time, and I was the leader of government business. And even yesterday, while I was reflecting on the matter, seeing it on the agenda, I thought perhaps we could go with a short-term arrangement subject to further review shortly after the impending elections. But being here now in this debate with the argument about, one, the effectiveness of the ECJ to date, the fact that they have been able to survive without controversy, and that nobody has questioned the role and function of the ECJ and their decisions. The fact that they will now have to deal with controversial issues that necessarily arise during a campaign, it has made me pause to think whether or not this institution that has become world-renowned is going to be subject to that level of controversy. And perhaps it is not the time to proceed in this way. We might want to pause to reflect a little bit on it. And if there's a need to put in place an arrangement for the local government elections, we can look at the way the tribunals have functioned, say under the state of emergency, and employ that facility to create somebody who is independent of the ECJ.
We could sign an agreement, the two parties.
And we could actually sign an agreement today to put that into effect for this interim period for the local government elections. We will give you a word. We will honor that today if that agreement could be arrived at. I believe that we need to reflect seriously and at this stage not to affect the way the ECJ has been operating. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I listened carefully to the contribution from that side of the House in relation to the rearrangement that is proposed, which was agreed on by this House and which actually was sent to the Cabinet of Jamaica for its final position and guidance to the parliamentary legislative team for the drafting of the amendments to the bill in order for it to come back to this House to then be passed and implemented. And it is regrettable that you recognize that there was a need for this. And if you heard the member from Southeast St. Andrew indicated the reasons, because he was part of that process. And part of the reason was the seeming, shall I say, reason by way of time that the Ombudsman actually met and worked, and whether or not it was efficient use of public resources to have an institution that acted only periodically. And whilst there is an electoral commission with the credibility of which he spoke, and the composition which guaranteed bipartisan arrangement. And, you know, Mr. Speaker, I have been a member of the then EAC, which is the precursor to the Electoral Commission, which we now have. And I spent long hours with the member from St. Andrew North Central, was also a member. They are now surviving member on that side, who can say, yes, I was a member. But we too were members from then. The days of Gladstone Mills as chairman and a strong team, several key leaders of the opposition then were part of it, including a former Prime Minister, Portia Simpson-Miller. So we understand that it took a long time to build out an institution that now has global recognition and notoriety. And the composition of it guarantees a bipartisan approach. And we, while I was there, and I know currently, adjudicate on various matters relating to the democratic practice and process, managing ROPA with the highest tradition and integrity. And the process required serious to-ing and fro-ing, and even sometimes acrimonious discussions about where a PD should go and how boundaries should be cut and how officers of the Electoral Commission are appointed and elected, and returning officers and presiding officers and all sorts of things, and we constantly do this. So that commission, Mr. Speaker, is well attuned to deal with political differences and conflicts. And so to repose the role of the ombudsman in an institution with that integrity will not damage its process, but it will in fact strengthen the capacity of everybody, particularly the people of Jamaica, to believe in the integrity of reports which come from it. And rather than having a single individual adjudicating, subjected to therefore their own whims and fancies and their own biases, and at points they disagree because they don't like you, or they get bad report from somebody who don't like you, and they act in that kind of way. You will have a situation now, Mr. Speaker, when a point is made about the action of a member during a campaign, you can be assured that both sides of the fence will have a say in it, and a decision will be taken that is fair and reasonable. But, you know, I don't want to impute motives, and my position as leader of this House has been all of that throughout, and you know how I've operated. But it worries me a little bit that the timing of this position, when everybody knows that within the next few days, weeks, at most, there is going to be an election, which will require the purpose, which will require an adjudication by an independent body. Everybody knows that. And I don't want to impute motives, because you know I don't do that. But it worries me that somebody might want to be able to have an election happen without an institution or indeed a reference to an adjudicator who is independent like an ombudsman. And it worries me, and I hope that that isn't the case. I hope that is not the case. I hope that is not the case. Because I would want to go into an election knowing that there is an adjudicating body, so that when there are infractions, I have a recourse and I can get a remedy. And so, Mr. Speaker, even if we recognize that there may be some elements for tweeting in terms of the measures that are before us, I think we can accept the fact that we need to ensure that there is this institution, and then we can deal with retweeting and tweeting to make it perfect in the way we want. But I, as the leader of this House, would urge that we ensure that there is an arrangement in place so that within the next few weeks, when we are in the trenches, we can have recourse to ruling, a proper recourse indeed. And there's no more proper recourse in my mind than a body such as the Electoral Commission that has had the approbation of everybody in this country and even the extent of the entire world, because they look at what we have here as a model and try to emulate it. Every election that is held in the Commonwealth, somebody from Jamaica is invited to go and to adjudicate because of the integrity that we have built in this process. And I want to make sure that what we are doing is strengthening, because the entire electoral process is not just about whether your name is on the list or whether you get elected or not, but it is a process also of election. And so, Mr. Speaker, it is my view that this House can indeed consider and pass this measure to enable us to have an adjudication process during this election, and then we can tweet if we need to tweet and get the right thing that we want in the final honors. May it please you, Honourable.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Minister, could you just concede so that the member can have his say and then?
Has done so. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And a point of clarification, and pardon me for not being here earlier to fully appreciate one good institution. Pardon me again for being late, but I want some clarification, Mr. Speaker, as it relates to the powers of the political ombudsman residing now in the Electoral Commission. Is it that all the members of the ECJ will sit or be a part of that body that adjudicates? Or is it only the independent members? Or is it that a particular person will be appointed in that position? That is the clarification I would like to get from the minister. Where is the minister? It's a very important question. So you know, I personally want to know, seeing that we are contemplating an election, and if it is a short fix, I have no problem with that. But for clarification purposes, I would want to get an understanding as to how we'll operationalize the concept of the political ombudsman office residing in the ECJ. Mr. Speaker.
Minister, question is asked.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank the members for their contributions.
Sorry, Minister. There's another member who wants to share in the debate.
If I may ask the Minister to yield a moment.
Turn the mic.
Mr. Speaker, as someone who has spent a total of 11 years, 7 years in the EAC and 4 years in the Commission, as one of the founding members of the Commission, I feel compelled to make my very limited contribution just by asking a few questions. And for those who have spoken about it, I can speak categorically about the struggles we have had over the years. And I know how difficult and trying it has been over these years to have both sides come to a common understanding and agreement. And we, I think, have reached that point, and we are an example to the world. At no stage was the question of the Ombudsman being a part of the ECJ seriously contemplated on the basis that we are going to have an election soon. I urge the Minister to take a good look at that. I urge him to take a good look at that. Because things that are done in this way have a way of becoming permanent. So I would like to know from him today, is it intended that this fix is to form the basis on which we go forward with the Electoral Commission of Jamaica? That's what I want to know. Because if it is, then it needs a complete recalibration of the concept around which the Electoral Commission was founded. This is arguably the most far-reaching. It's one of the most important institutions of not only Jamaica, but the entire hemisphere. It is not an institution that can take tinkering. We have gained a reputation. It has made Jamaica proud to speak. We have been invited throughout the world to demonstrate to the world the success that we have achieved. And I do not buy the idea that we are in a hurry because we are having an election. Mechanisms can be found with creative minds and well-thinking people where we can solve that problem without tampering with what we have achieved. I feel very strongly about this, and I sincerely hope that even if it requires us to come back here tomorrow, spend the night and consider it carefully and hold discussions as broad-based with the level of integrity and concern that others may have, that we can in that time frame and come back refreshed with a new set of approaches to this problem. Mr. Speaker, the differences are not insignificant. The principles underlying the establishment of an ombudsman and the principles underlying the establishment of the Electoral Commission are not simple. They are very deliberate, well constructed, and have served us well. One, as the member from Southeast said, it was felt that the office of the ombudsman had no teeth. Was a leader without teeth. Well, there are fixes to that if it is deemed to be necessary. There are fixes to that. It is not beyond our collective wisdom to fix those. But do not tamper with the Electoral Commission of Jamaica. Thank you.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, may I first of all thank the members who have spoken and shared their perspective on what was agreed over 10 years ago. It is a fact, Mr. Speaker, that many of the members here were here when MP Warmington put it forward that the synergy between the political ombudsman, the work of the political ombudsman, and the Electoral Commission, they are twinned. And he felt that the political ombudsman was unnecessary. When you look at the debate at that time, he felt the few disputes that the political ombudsman had to deal with could easily be dealt with by the Electoral Commission. Mr. Speaker, the problem with the political ombudsman is when you have a single individual making a decision. And as the member from Southeast St. Andrew said, and the member from Eastern Kingston said, it is an ineffective body. Many people inside here, when the existing political ombudsman over the last 15 or more years, write them to apologize, to withdraw, to take down orange and green flags. They totally ignore them. I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, that I wrote many times to the political ombudsman over the last 20 odd years because I don't put up political slogans, but I constantly tell the political ombudsman, I see orange paint and green and orange flag all over. Could you ask my contender to remove them? Not a word. Nothing has been done. Nothing. And the question, Mr. Speaker, you want a situation where what is being suggested is to give enforcement powers to one individual? To one individual? We want to criminalize the political code of conduct? We want to criminalize well, how are you going to enforce it? One individual, Mr. Speaker, how would you, and I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, one of the reasons why this thing took so long is because the Ministry of Justice looked at other jurisdictions and all of them have penalties. And we decided we don't want penalties. We want moral suasion to be able to bring about compliance. Fine. Well, Mr. Speaker, why would we discuss a matter when we have agreed in this Parliament? We agreed that it should be subsumed. And all that took place is that it never, and as I pointed out, it never happened in your time. When we took over, we decided not to interfere because the political ombudsman was in place. So we waited until the political ombudsman term had expired. And all along, we have said it repeatedly that it will happen. And no one has ever objected. All of a sudden, Mr. Speaker, all of a sudden, at the 11th moment, they're objecting. Why are you objecting at the 11th moment? Right? But you have never objected before. You have never objected before. But you are aware that you are a party to the agreement.
Members.
And this bill, Mr. Speaker, the single thing in this bill is nothing more than to say that the ECJ will be the political ombudsman. That's the only thing in the bill. That is something agreed. Over 10 years now.
Minister.
And when the leader of the opposition can ask if anything is wrong with the bill, that's the only thing in the bill. We repeal the section about the appointment of the political ombudsman.
Minister. Members. Members.
What?
We have all been given enough time to each member. Allow the minister to complete, please.
So, Mr. Speaker, when I can hear the member from Western St. Andrew saying there's nothing about resignation. It's the ECJ. They have their own appointment and how they resign. As a single body, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, when we decide that this body of 9 members is more appropriate than having a single member, we thought of several possibilities, as I pointed out. Should we have one commissioner? Right? Or should we have only the selected members? And it is, Mr. Speaker, it is, as I pointed out repeatedly, as I pointed out earlier, it is the ECJ who wrote us, and I quoted, they don't mind having the functions of the political ombudsman. You want me to repeat what they said? This is a letter from the Electoral Commission. It said, the commissioners continue, we have been in discussion, to support the proposal that the functions of the political ombudsman be assumed by the ECJ. However, we are of the view that all commissioners should perform the functions of the political ombudsman. And they continue. It is in the letter. You want to see the letter? I can show it to you. The matters to be addressed by the ombudsman are primarily related to conduct. We believe that the full commission, including both selected and nominated members, are best suited to address the nuances related to conduct. And we strongly suggest that in this regard, the commissioners shall be indivisible. Mr. Speaker, there are members who have spoken in this chambers who have been in cabinet and have been in the Electoral Commission. My colleague and friend from North Central St. Andrew. It is not unusual that you have a strong debate at cabinet, in the board of directors, in the Electoral Commission. People don't agree, but at the end of the day, whether by consensus or majority or unanimity, it is the decision of the electorate, it's the decision that counts. And as the electoral commissioners have said, once they make a decision, it is indivisible. And I like that idea, Mr. Speaker. But it means that once they come to a decision, regardless of the debate amongst the 9 of them, the decision will be carried out, and who best to ensure that the decision is complied with? By the representatives on that commission from both political parties, knowing that a full debate took place, and therefore the political actor who misconducted him or herself or breached the political code of conduct, they know that there was full discussion and therefore you must comply. So, Mr. Speaker, when the Commission makes a recommendation to the political actor and to the political party, you expect compliance, which is not what you got with the previous political ombudsman. And so, Mr. Speaker, there's no doubt that we have considered this thing fully. We have looked at the possibilities. What is the main objection, Mr. Speaker, brought by the members? What is the main objection? The main objection, Mr. Speaker, is that the electoral commissioners, the ECJ, is an outstanding body, a successful body, praised by the world. And to put this simple act, which, how many complaints do they get? To them, that is going to taint them with, Mr. Speaker, with due respect to my colleagues on both sides who have spoken, they undermine the strength of integrity and character of the members who sit on the ECJ. To say that because they're going to get the political ombudsman conduct or the conduct to come and to adjudicate that it will affect their independence. Well, what you say? Well, as I understand it, Mr. Speaker, they're concerned, as I heard from virtually all of them. This body is so successful, don't overbear, burden, or trouble it with anything addition. Mr. Speaker, we have had fulsome discussion with the ECJ. As I read, they have no difficulty taking on the role. And no, I had a discussion with them. And Mr. Speaker, could you let me finish, please? So, Mr. Speaker, the idea that these 9 members, that their role could be tainted or affected and it would undermine the success that they have achieved. With due respect, is unmeritorious. Taking on this role, Mr. Speaker, I go further. I go further. When I was championing the NIDS, one of the things, Mr. Speaker, I remembered was that the previous Prime Minister, P.J. Bipartisan, said that one of the main roles of the ECJ was to be in charge of the national identification. And that is why he wanted full-time commissioners. They didn't have it. We have a separate NIDS. But one thing we recommended, which I think will be taken over, is that they may have oversight of the NIDS. That was a recommendation which I put, and I think it's possible. But, Mr. Speaker, there's no doubt that MP Warmington is now here, will recall how he made that presentation, and everybody in this House, the 63 members, agreed. And don't tell me because we didn't bring it on 10 years ago that it is now outdated. Mr. Speaker, I have pointed out that with the Electoral Commission, you have the possibility, not possibility, the real likelihood that when that body of 9 assess a complaint, that it will be given full consideration, and when they make a decision, that the recommendation is very likely to be complied with. So, Mr. Speaker, may I make the point that we should be lucky, and we are lucky, that we have an ECJ with the stature, as members have said, the trust and confidence of the Jamaican people, and I think when they undertake this role, they will undertake it with integrity. Yes. They will undertake it with fairness. Yeah. They will undertake it in a manner that will put all political actors to know that if they engage in misconduct, this body, the ECJ, will make recommendation, appropriate recommendation for the political behavior of this country to improve. Yes. So, Mr. Speaker, I would say that it is quite clear to me that this body, when it becomes take on the functions of the political ombudsman, that not only will it carry out this function with fairness, it has the 63 constituencies across, that they have the resource to assist them, as I pointed out, to get intelligence, to get corroboration, to get information. And, Mr. Speaker, it is the best position that this country can have to have this bill passed this afternoon. So, Mr. Speaker, I now ask that the bill be read a second time.
Question is that the bill be read a second time. Those in favor? Members. Members, please. Both members. Members, if you both continue. There's a divide. Clark. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, There's no doubt that we need a political ombudsman in place at the earliest possibility. There's no doubt, Mr. Speaker, we need a political ombudsman at the earliest possibility. I'm going to ask that the meeting be suspended so that good sense can prevail until we next meet.
Question is that the matter be suspended. Those in favor? Those against? Matter is suspended.
Is the report ready? Mr. Speaker, the motion in the name of the member from South St. Catherine will be taken in the short, abbreviated form that has been agreed. And thereafter, we will seek a suspension of the sitting for 5 minutes to allow for the report of the PAAC to be completed and tabled. May it please you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as the House Leader has indicated, the motion for which I gave notice of earlier on, it asks that it be referred to the Economy and Production Committee of this House to be thoroughly investigated and a report returned here. And at that time, the House will have the opportunity to fully debate the motion with the recommendations and findings and recommendations that emanates from the committee. I therefore ask that the motion be approved.
Mr. Speaker, there's a small matter of procedure here in that the language of the member should reflect his request for a suspension of the standing orders to allow. May it please you, sir.
I now ask for suspension of the standing order to enable me to take the motion for which I gave notice of earlier today.
The question is that the standing order be suspended to enable the member to take the motion, notice of which he gave earlier. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. So it will be referred. Can we just ask that it be referred to the committee? Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Having regard to the very smooth way in which this motion was handled and disposed of, I now move for the suspension of the sitting for 5 minutes to enable the report of the PSA. The report is here, but not here. So 5 minutes and then.
The request is that we move for the suspension of the House sitting so that for 5 minutes for the report of the PAC to be presented. Those in favor, circulated. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
just meds it.
Instead of hurting and fighting each other.
Let's help each other.
We don't need to fight.
We're all here to learn.
Your classmate could be a future lawyer or minister.
Do you know that your classmate or your schoolmate could be a future prime minister?
So here what? Just make that